All right, welcome back to Radio Wasteland. Our guest tonight is Hep Aldridge. He's a certified scuba diver, cave diver, and amateur archaeologist whose main area of interest is pre-Columbian cultures of the America. He has led or been part of archaeological expeditions to Mexico and Honduras, making discoveries that have been reported in National Geographic. That is some real stuff. Hep, thanks for being on Radio Wasteland.
My pleasure.
So, my first thing that leads here is I think a lot of us want to eventually know, like, oh, did you see something amazing down there? But, the first question that pops to mind to me is what led to what? Was it an interest in this pre-Columbian stuff that led you to do the scuba diving, or was it scuba diving that led you to this stuff?
That's a question that's going to take a little time.
We got an hour.
Perfect.
Get it done in an hour.
Okay. But I'll try and keep it succinct.
Yeah.
I started getting interested in pre-Columbian cultures when I lived in New Mexico. My father was with NASA, and he was working on the Apollo program in the early days. And they were testing the launch escape system at White Sands Missile Range. And we moved from East Texas to Las Cruces, New Mexico. And I spent my junior and senior year in high school out there. While I was there, and I've always been interested in treasure. I mean, what guy or gal isn't interested in hidden treasure or buried treasure or stolen treasure or,
Right.
whatever. And of course, the Southwest is just full of all kinds of stories about bank robberies and train robberies and money and gold that's been hidden by the robbers because they couldn't get away with it and they never came back for it. So that kind of got my interest in the treasure aspect. While I was living in New Mexico, Las Cruces is only 45 miles north of El Paso. And it's on basically what has been for many hundreds of years, a direct route out of Mexico. I started hearing about legends of treasure being taken out of Mexico by the Aztecs. Montezuma's treasure before the conquistadors could get to it. And I was like,
Interesting.
I've never heard of the Aztecs to speak of. So I started doing some research. The treasure is what caught my interest. And I started doing some research, and I learned a fair amount about the Aztecs and the fact that they were an indigenous culture down there and quite large. And they were a very rich culture, lots of gold, lots of silver, all the kinds of things that a person that might be interested in treasure would want to know about. And then I learned about the ransom of Montezuma and the fact that the natives or the Aztec people had spirited out a lot of his treasure before giving it to him because he was killed prior to, the treasure being delivered. And it just so happens that stories that I heard out there had them coming right through my area, right through Las Cruces, going through across the Oregon Mountains, which are just to the north, and then further up into the Four Corners area of the Southwest. So that really got my interest. The fact that they had a lot of treasure, and the fact that they came through my area, I started doing more research about it. And that's when I realized that the Aztecs were only one small segment of the population in the Mexico and Central America. And I learned about the Maya, the Olmec, the Toltec, Zapotec, Mixtec. I mean, there's a whole range of civilizations down there, or groups down there, that all made up this whole area of Central America and Mexico. And they all had unique things about them. And one of the things that really started getting me even more interested is when I started seeing the architecture and the building and what they had done. Because you have to remember that all of them were a Neolithic culture, which means they were New Stone Age. They didn't have metal tools to speak of. The Maya didn't. They didn't have the wheel. And they didn't have beasts of burden. So basically, they built cities like Tikal and Chichen Itza and Calakmul, fantastic cities without metal tools. And I was like, how could they do that? Because they're still standing.
Right.
So that really then got me interested in the archaeology part of things. And I continued my reading and my research, and really fell in love with it. When I was, I got my last duty station assigned when I was in the military at Homestead Air Force Base. And that's when I started hearing about the sunken ships off the coast of Florida that were Spanish fleets that were bringing treasure from South America, Central America, bringing up the coast of Florida and then turning and heading for Spain. And the number of ships that had wrecked and the amount of treasure that supposedly was on them, that got me all excited about that. And I got certified back in 1969 while I was down at Homestead, and spent some next 2 years diving some in the Keys and meeting some extraordinary people, treasure hunters, basically the icons of treasure hunting on the East Coast of the United States anyway.
So, what is the ratio of, I'm curious as to people's motivations into getting into treasure hunting. One of them, of course, is I'm going to get rich. The other is I'm just sort of really interested in the research, and this is sort of a fun way to spend my time. What is the ratio of treasure hunter to treasures actually discovered? Is there a fair amount of treasure actually being discovered?
Yes, actually there is, and that's directly related to modern technology.
Interesting.
As diving technology has improved, and more tools are available to those that are doing the underwater research, whether it's magnetometers, metal detectors, a number of things, more is being found. But for instance, and I'm going into shameless self-promotion, the book that
That's
I wrote.
what we're all about. Don't worry about it.
the book
that was
I wrote.
The first, proposed name for the show was Shameless Self-Promotion, but then Chauncey was like, well, but Radio Wasteland. So
I like them both.
It's in the spirit of the
there you go.
of the thing.
I delve into a treasure fleet that was lost off the coast of Florida here in 1715. There were 11 ships that were part of it that left Havana. And when the fleets would come from South America, Central America, to head back to Spain, they followed the coast of Florida up actually north, probably somewhere in South Carolina, before they would hang a hard right and head towards Europe. One of the things that they were always told, which I learned, I did not know, is that when they were coming up the coast of Florida, they should always keep the coast in view. So they always had to be within eyesight of the coast of Florida. That's pretty darn close. And the 1715 fleet was made up of 11 ships. Well, on the night of July 30th, 1715, a hurricane was brewing in the Caribbean, moving this way. And about 2 a.m. on the July 31st, it hit. And out of the 11 ships, 10 were sunk. So a hurricane was coming from the southeast, and ships were traveling up the coast of Florida within sight of land. So you have to understand that they got blown aground in pretty shallow water. And I would say probably in the past 5 to 10 years, significant treasure is being found along the coast of Florida in 20 feet of water or less.
Wow.
So that kind of talks about the treasure and where it's at. Now, finding it and making a living off of it, that's a whole different ball of wax.
Right.
Because in the state of Florida, we get into some really interesting political implications to it, if you will.
That's what I was wondering. It's like, what's the law say about that? Is there a point in time where ancient discoveries become public domain, for lack of a better word? Where
No.
or do you own it when you find it? Like, oh, these are my doubloons now. You know, it's like, you know, how does that work? I mean, is there no government claim to it, or
in the state of Florida?
So it's different from state to state.
State waters are 3 miles offshore.
Hmm.
The territorial waters then go from 3 miles to 12 miles. And then you get into international waters. If you find anything within the 3 mile limit off the coast, 20% of what you find automatically goes to the state. Okay? That's right off the top. They get the pick of whatever it is. Now here's the kicker, and one of the things that I address in the book, which I just really, it kind of sticks in my craw, and there are a lot of people out there that will not agree with me, which is fine. The waters, the ocean, the bottom was leased by the state of Florida to private individuals who are now charging treasure hunters to work portions of the bottom of the ocean.
Interesting.
And so you have to pay, the last time I checked it was somewhere around $2,500 a season to work a section of the bottom where you think there might be treasure.
Really?
And that's the key, where there might be treasure.
So let me throw this out there. So Florida has taken their 3 miles of underwater coast expanse, and they have leased it out to individuals. So now these people are paying Florida for the right to charge other people.
Right.
That's basically.
But here's the kicker.
I don't even see how that's allowed, but sorry. Go ahead.
I know. Well, it's like I said, it kind of sticks in my craw.
Yeah.
But here's the kicker. It's primarily leased to one person.
Yeah.
And for the longest time, that person was Mel Fisher. And I think most people would remember the name of, he actually started out in California teaching scuba diving. And he was brought to Florida by a group that I almost had the opportunity to dive for, which was the Real 8 Corporation. And they were located down here in Cape Canaveral for a while, but then also down in the Sebastian area. And the person who started the company was Kip Wagner, and he was a construction man. And he started finding real silver coins up and down the beach combing back in the late 50s, mid to late 50s. And he realized after throwing some back in the water and watching them skip across the top that was silver, that was treasure. And so he started a company, and it was called Real 8. And he and about 6 or 7 other individuals went together to form this company. They realized that they needed some additional help, and they were looking, I'm not exactly sure how Mel Fisher came into it, but somehow they knew of Mel, who had a dive shop out in California, and they talked him into moving to Florida and becoming part of Real 8, which he did, but then broke away in, from what I understand, not too pleasant terms, and went on his own, and then went on down to work the Keys and discover the Etosha, which is one of the largest treasures that's been found off the coast of Florida. But he worked a deal and got a lease from down around Port St. Lucie all the way up to Sebastian, which is a pretty extensive area. And that section is known as the Treasure Coast. And the reason it's known as the Treasure Coast is in that area is where the 1715 fleet went down. His daughter recently sold the lease to another individual or a company who are now selling leases or putting out leases for different sections of the bottom as we speak, and are making the money off of it. Like I said,
classic regulatory capture.
Say you go out
American way,
and you pay $2,500,
Right.
and you go out and you take your boat, your divers, your time, your effort, and you find $100,000 worth of gold.
Right.
Okay. If it's just gold, so basically you come in, you say, hey, I found $100,000 worth of gold. I'm rich. Well, state of Florida gets 20% of that. Okay, so now I've got $80,000
Right.
worth of gold. Well, unfortunately, the person that you paid the money to work the lease gets 50% of whatever you find.
What?
Wow.
How is that a thing?
So you pay 20% to Florida. You pay 50% of the 80% that you have.
Right.
So you do all the work and you wind up with 40% of what you find.
Yep.
Yeah, that does not seem.
Yeah. So, but there are a lot of people that do it. And
well, yeah, of course. What choice do you have if it's something that you love to do? I mean, what choice?
Right.
You know.
And there are a lot of people that do it for a living. I'm friends with a number of people who are diving right now and are finding gold. But that always struck me as being wrong.
Yeah.
And when I retired and I decided that I was going to start a treasure hunting company, and I really delved into it, I was like, I don't know if you can cuss on this program, but somebody threw the bullshit flag, and I said, no. I'm not going to put my money and my time and my team and out there to do this. But I had an interest in it, and I've studied it. I've studied the fleet. Out of the 11 ships, 1 survived, 10 sank. Only 6 have been found and identified.
Wow.
That means there's 4 more ships out there that have not been found, and they were all laden with treasure.
What were the other ones? The value of, on the average, the other ones that were discovered.
Well,
are we looking at like 100,000? Or are we looking like?
Oh
millions?
you're talking anywhere from say 50,000 to the hundreds of thousands.
I see.
And here's the thing: when the ships sank, they ran aground, which means the hurricane blew them towards land, and as it did, it ripped the bottom off of them. And so they moved a significant distance as they were sinking. And so the treasure is not just located in one area where the ship sank. It's strewn across the bottom in what's known as a debris field. So the treasure hunter has to go out and try and find a debris field. And if you find one, you use metal detectors and magnetometers and side scan sonar to try and find something that gives you an indication that there's probably a wreck there. Then you have to go down and you have to start working the site.
Speaking of the technology of this stuff, this is a statement I've made on this show many times before, and that is, I am both hugely impressed and very disappointed in human technology. Part of me is like, oh, I can't believe that we're capable of doing this, and then the other part of me is, oh, I can't believe we're not capable of doing this. It seems to me like we should be able to discover that pretty easily. I mean, but this is my sci-fi sitting on the couch watching TV attitude, not I have no real world. So what kind of technology are we looking at here, and what makes it so difficult to find? You would think that something like gold or something, we would have some way of laser picking that up, or
well,
forgive my ignorance, but
no, not at
right.
all. I mean, there's so many people that think, well, why can't you just detect it?
You're right.
Well, if you're on the bottom with an underwater metal detector, you can detect it. But the bottom's pretty darn big. So where do you look? And that's where side scan sonar, which actually can give you a picture of the bottom and what's on it, and using a magnetometer, which comes into play, because what a magnetometer does, you tow it behind your boat, and it measures the magnetic field of the Earth. Okay, now we're getting into some what I call cool science, I think, because the magnetic field of the Earth is actually mapped. And there's a chart that you can go online and find that shows you the magnetic reading of any part of the Earth that you want to know. So what you do is you'll pull your magnetometer, knowing what your parameters are for where you're looking, and you look for any aberrations or any blips, if you will. Now, the only thing a magnetometer will do, it will detect ferrous metals. Okay, it won't detect gold, it won't detect silver.
Right.
What's ferrous? Magnetic?
So,
like
yes,
iron,
magnetic, iron-based. So what you look for, what you're towing for, as it's called, mowing the grass, is cannon, anchors, fittings, ship fittings. All of those will show up if there's any kind of a concentration.
Right.
So you try and find that, mark it GPS, and then that's where you start looking, thinking, okay, if there's cannon there, if there's anchors there, if there's ship fittings that are iron, then that's a good place to say, okay, a ship sank here, now it's time to get busy.
So
Right.
in the 300 years since the 1715 thing, like presumably other ships have gone down in this area as well, right? Or no?
Yes. There are some. I won't
get
say
what
a
you're
lot.
saying. Does that mean that the debris field can get confusing and you can constantly be finding wrecks of no value?
Absolutely.
Is that what you were getting at, Kara?
Yeah.
No, absolutely. But you don't know that until you find a debris field,
Right.
and you dive it. So here you've towed this magnetometer, say for a week, and you find this debris field. You go down, you dive it for another 4 or 5 days before you can even determine if, in fact, it's something that you're looking for or if it's junk.
Right.
So there's 2 weeks that you've spent, fuel for your boat, time for your divers, expenses that you have, and you wind up with, oh, that sank in 1968.
Right.
But you don't know.
Yeah.
We found a mother load of asbestos. Great.
By the same token, I know people who have gone down in 8 feet of water, right off the coast, right off the beach, in 8 feet of water, where there's concretions or rocks that are limestone, and have uncovered hundreds of thousands of dollars of gold coins.
Wow.
Why? Because they got ripped out of the bottom, they got scattered, and the wave action over the 300 years that you were talking about, Kara, have moved it from where it went down toward land. So it's a process, and it's very extensive. And that's why they call it treasure hunting and not treasure finding.
Yeah. I'm also curious about the archaeological value of some of this stuff. I mean, obviously you've got gold, you've got silver, but is there stuff that you find that museums pay handsomely for? Is there stuff you find that's of interest to?
Sure. And let me tell you, one of the biggest treasures that has not been found from the 1715 fleet, I'll talk about that again, is the king's dowry.
The king's dowry.
King Philip of Spain, they had just gone through in 1715, they just finished, now I'm going to have to dig into it, the War of Succession. So Spain was kind of broke, and he needed allies and he needed money. So that's why he was commissioning all these fleets to come from South America, Central America, to bring the treasure back to Spain. Plus, he was about to get married, a marriage of convenience to build allies, and his queen-to-be had, I don't know whether it was requested or the family required, a huge dowry. And it is reported to have been so large that it couldn't be carried on one ship. So it had to be carried on multiple ships. So now you're talking about jewelry, emeralds, pearls, all kinds of church-related artifacts, crucifixes, just a variety of things that, yes, a museum would love to have. And right now, that has not been found.
Interesting.
That basically would be the mother lode if you were to start finding that.
What about, on an even more lesser level, what if you find a ship from, let's say, the 1700s, and there's all the kitchen equipment, something that's very blah, who cares? Is that the sort of thing that a museum would still want,
Probably.
Okay.
Probably.
Yeah.
So pots and pans, original stuff, from
If
original.
if it lasted.
Right.
And that's the thing. Salt water is very, very unfriendly to any kind of metal other than gold.
Right.
When you find gold in salt water that's been down there for 300 years, it looks like you just brought it right out of the jewelry store.
Oh, really?
You fan the sand away and
That's
shiny
weird.
gold is right there. There are no concretions built up on it. Salt water doesn't affect it, doesn't deteriorate it at all. It's just bright, shiny, take your breath away gold.
Oh,
Wow. Well,
Now,
that's like the classic treasure hunting thing, isn't
Yeah,
it? That's,
absolutely.
That's the dream.
Yeah. Silver, on the other hand, as you probably know, if you have silver jewelry, will tarnish and turn
Tarnishes.
black.
Yeah.
Right.
But it also will allow marine growth on it. In other words, so you wind up with a there was a story a few years back about a guy who was metal detecting on the beach down south by Sebastian, which is, I don't know, 30, 40 miles from, no, not even 30, probably 25, 30 miles from here, and came across a rock that was in the waves and went around it. And a guy came behind him because there are lots of beach going metal detectors. Now, if you find something on the beach, it's yours.
That's
But if you find something in the water, then all of a sudden the rules change. Anyway, the guy that was following him, and it was a basketball-sized rock, went across it with his metal detector. His metal detector went nuts, and it turned out to be a clump of 1,500 silver coins that had glommed together with limestone and sea life into this mass.
That's so
And
weird.
he picked it up, and bingo, 1,500 coins.
So it's still at value, even though it was
Absolutely
messed up from all this stuff.
It's easy to get concretions off of metal like that.
I see.
Yeah. Silver.
And
cleans
once you do, if you can see mint marks on the coins or visible ways of identifying the size of the coin, cobs, reals, pieces of 8, boom, the value goes up from the coin collector as well as from the treasure hunter.
All right. Well, we don't have much longer until we're going to take a break here. So I got one question left about treasure hunting. Then I want to talk about some of the potential for underwater cities and stuff like that. But it seems like it's expensive to go hunting. It seems like there are a lot of things in people's way, and the reward can be incredibly high. So from that and the movie watching culture that we all live in, do you have to guard your data? Do you have to be concerned when you're out there of like new age pirates or, are there safety concerns like that?
Yes, there are.
Interesting.
And here's one of the other things to know about treasure hunting on the coast of Florida. Say I decided, screw this. I'm just going to go out and dive for treasure. I'm not going to pay anybody anything. I'm going to find it on my own. And I go out and I start diving, and I happen to be diving on a site, that a ship went down. They watch them.
Oh, do they?
Those
Interesting.
areas are under surveillance. And if you're found diving on a site without a permit or without a lease, you can be fined, you can lose your boat, and you can go to jail.
Or maybe get shot. It kind of.
Well,
I'm kind of making the parallels in my head here to the Pacific Northwest and stumbling across a pot farm when you're out hiking, and you're all like, "I do not want to be here."
Yeah, no, it's kind of different. The getting shot part is not quite as prevalent as as winding up, being prosecuted.
Right.
And so, that's always a big concern. And, it's a reality.
Wow.
Yeah, that is wild. All right. Well, we're coming up on break here. You're listening to Hep Aldridge. His website is hepaldridge.com. He's the author of Sunken Treasure, Lost World and Sunken Treasure Revelations. And we're going to take a break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about more sunken treasure and maybe the possibility of some lost world. You're listening to Radio Wasteland. All right, welcome back to Radio Wasteland and our guest, Hep Aldridge. You can check him out at hepaldridge.com. He is the author of Sunken Treasure, Lost Worlds, as well as Sunken Treasure Revelations. And guess what we're talking about? We're talking about sunken treasure right here with Hep Aldridge. Hep, before we talked a lot about treasure and the process of trying to get it and stuff like that, but I think the number one question that everybody would want to know is, did you ever find something down there that you just went, holy crap, this is the
real deal. Yeah.
This is the real deal. Like this is, because we see footage of potential underwater cities in around Japan, and some people say, okay, well, these monolithic things are actually carved into the rock by the ocean, and some people say that's not possible. What about the circle and Bimini Road and stuff like that? Is there anything down there that has made you go like, holy crap, I found something?
I can't say that I have necessarily. My diving has been, fairly limited and pretty much focused on, the things that we've been talking about. But I took an expedition, and I think it was in 95. I got involved in an expedition that went to Mexico to take a look at a site down there on the Candelaria River called El Tigre. And in Cortez's Chronicles, and now this is kind of not treasure, but Tara, I think you asked about things that museums would really go nuts over.
Yeah, the archaeological interest.
Yeah, well, that's what this is. In Cortez's Chronicles, when he came through Mexico, he talked about a place that was a major Maya trading center, and it was on a river, and he was just so impressed with it, and it was called Itzam Kanak. Love those little Maya names, man.
Totally.
Yeah.
And one of the things that he talked about is that in order to get into the city across the river, the Maya had cut down one tree and felled it, and it went from one side of the river to the other. And that's how he and his men and the Maya went back and forth between each side of the river. I got involved in an expedition to do some diving with the Mexican government, INA, which is the National Institute for Anthropology and History, on the site to see if we could find where that crossing might have been. Now, this is a very slow-moving river, so there's not a lot of current, and the deepest point that we found in the river was like 26 feet, so it wasn't very deep at all.
Okay.
And we were using a surface air supply, which was a Brownie third lung, because you can go down to easily 1 atmosphere with that, which is 33 feet. And so we were doing underwater exploration of this site to try and see if we could find this bridge thing. Well, one of the things that kind of upset me is, in my mind, we were looking in the wrong place. The river was too wide. The river it went in from the city into a marsh, and so there would be no big trees there anyway. But be that as it may, we're working with the Mexican government, and they're not really calling the shots, but they're making strong hints. So we started diving, and what we found, and this is where the significance comes in, is that the river had changed course. And so it had encroached on the city over the hundreds of years that since Cortez wrote his piece. And in 12, 15 feet of water, we found submerged platforms, carved stone platforms. And we found remnants of effigy vases that were used in ritual purposes. And so we were able to bring this to the attention of the Mexican government, and they had no idea. And we started finding more and more. And one of the biggest things that we found was the encroachment of the river had covered up what was a carved wharf area or stone-faced wharf area that was pretty big. And it was about 4 or 5 feet underwater. And there was carved stones, and then there was a step down, and there was another carved stone down into like 4 or 5 more feet of water, and then into the mud. And it just so happened that area lined up perfectly with the main thoroughfare going through the city towards the pyramids, through the ruins. And at that site, we found pottery that was not at all part of the local culture. It was definitely imported from different places. And that's the thing that the Mexican government got really excited about, because nobody really knew where the site of Itzum Canak was. And so from what the pottery that we found and the wharf and then the platform and used for ritual purposes, they were able to put together all the pieces and basically say, and it is now documented, that site that we dove on and that we helped recover this stuff is the site that was talked about in Cortez's chronicles, Itzum Canak. And so our finds there, I found a beautiful, and I almost hate to say this, a flint spear point that was about 8 to 10 inches long. Perfect. I mean, and I was walking through the mud along the bank of the river, and I just happened to step down. As I stepped down, I looked, and the mud was, 3 or 4 inches deep. I mean, it was, right. And here's this spear point. And I picked it up, and I was like, oh my God, look at, and not unfortunately, I was walking with the Mexican archaeologist that was sent to work with us on the site. And it was one of the significant discoveries that we made. Right. And of course, I had to say, oh, here you go.
Right.
My collection. Sure, take it. Yeah. But
you didn't stab him with it and run off into the jungle like a true treasure hunter.
You won't believe the things that ran through my head when I'm holding it.
Yeah, that's funny.
But that was very rewarding, because that was reported in National Geographic, and our discoveries were reported. The things that we found, the regional director of INA, which is the Institute of National Anthropology and History, came out to visit us, saw what we found, asked if we would bring what we found back to Campeche, which is the regional headquarters for INA. And this particular site, we had to travel 4 hours up a river to get to it. There was no way to get to it. There were no roads or anything. So it was a 4-hour river trip to get up to the site. And they asked when we came back, if we would bring it to the regional office in Campeche. We did that. They thanked us profusely, immediately packaged it up, and flew it to Mexico City. So in my mind, that was treasure. And it's amazing
absolutely.
that
they didn't know where the city was. They wanted to find the crossing, and in looking for the crossing, they found the city.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And they kind of had an idea, because the place is a plains. It's they raise cattle there, so it's a grazing area, and so there's not a lot of vegetation. But if you look out across the plain, there are these humps, covered with grass. Well, guess what, folks? Those were all pyramids. Those were all platforms that at one time were built by the Maya, and they have uncovered them. And now it's a tourist area. They built a road in since I've been down there, and You can go find it on the internet, and it's become a big thing. But our expedition helped solidify the fact that it was the city that was mentioned in Cortez's chronicles.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
That's way cool. Yeah,
that's Indiana Jones stuff.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah,
it
kind of felt that way.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about your books. Sunken Treasure, Lost Worlds, and Sunken Treasure, Revelations. Which is the first one? Lost Worlds is the first
Lost
one. Right?
Worlds, Sunken Treasure. Actually, it's a 3-part trilogy. Spoiler. And you really need to read all 3 books. But they build on one another, and there's a ton of accurate historical and archaeological research that has gone into all the books. Now,
so these are novels, but they're sort of historical fiction adventure.
Yes, they are novels, and yes, they are fiction, but there's an awful lot of history in them that is accurate, and a lot of archaeology that is accurate. But since they're novels, there does come that caveat, it's a suspension of disbelief.
Of course.
Because what I have done is I have tied really 3 main areas of interest to me, which are the treasure aspect, civilizations in the Americas, and space. I mean, my dad was with the Apollo program, and I grew up, for a long time with the Apollo program. And I am a firm believer that we are not the only, sentient planet in the world, in the universe, that is.
I don't see how it's possible that we are.
I have seen things during my time when I lived in New Mexico, and then my time in the military, that convinced me, that there's something out there. And so, yeah, I kind of tied in maybe a little extraterrestrial, pre-civilization, ancient history kind of stuff in there. But
excellent.
Sounds right up at my alley, frankly. It's got a little bit of everything that I'm interested in too.
I am currently in the culminating book. I'm in just 6 chapters into book 3, which will be the last book of the trilogy. And this is where it's going to really get, put on your foil hat and get your spacesuit out, because
without giving anything away, can you give us a basic plot rundown, a desk cover version of what these are about?
Well, book 1 talks about a group of guys, some friends, that get together and decide they want to form a treasure hunting company in Florida. Sound familiar?
Right. Yeah, it does.
And then they find out all the roadblocks that are in the way of doing that. And then they also say, well, screw it. We're not going to do it. But then a piece of information comes their way. And it's a piece of information that leads them into actually finding treasure. But more than that, something else, which then leads them into a trip to Ecuador and a search for what has been called the Lost Golden Library, or the Metal Library, which von Daniken wrote about, but was being recorded much before he wrote about it, as being a library that was put in place and hidden by a very advanced civilization. True? I don't know. But
is that synonymous with El Dorado, or?
Well, actually, it's kind of different, because El Dorado is a city of gold.
Right.
This is a library that was put together of information.
I see.
And maybe something else. We don't know. You have to read book 3 to find out. But anyway,
I like it.
So I tied all those together, and I tried to weave a tapestry that, number one, if you're interested in archaeology or history at all, it would keep you interested. If you're interested in mysteries or intrigue, it's going to keep you interested. And if you're interested in possibly what may have come before us, did somebody help our ancient civilizations build the pyramids or their cities, or, help them discover some of the things that we know and scratch our heads about, wow, how did they figure that out?
Right.
So that's, like I said, it's a 3-book series, and I'm going to wrap this part of it up in book 3. But since I've started writing book 3, the team, the company that was formed in the book is called Risky Business. Go figure.
Yeah.
Treasure hunting, diving, it's risky, and trying to make money off of it would be a business. Well, the Risky Business Chronicles are going to cover more than these 3 books.
I see. This arc is one of the adventures.
Sure.
Yeah.
You can live vicariously, from the comfort of your armchair if you want.
That is how I want.
There you go. I tell you,
that's our speed.
My days of adventuring and putting myself at risk and getting out there are pretty much over.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm finding this is a great outlet. Now, I never ever dreamed that I would write a book. Ever. When I was in my doctoral program and I was writing my dissertation, I swore I would never write anything again if I ever got that thing finished. I mean, and I meant it. It was harsh, but as things happen, I did, and I finished.
You took some time to recover.
It did.
Yeah.
I wasn't a 12-step program, but it was a recovery program. And
I don't blame you. I don't blame you. As my body has gotten older, I start to ask myself, why did I collect all these stories if I'm not going to write them down? And you were definitely out there collecting stories through your existence in hunting.
Well, and yeah, that's what happened. I was able to, and this story took probably 15, 17 years to come together in my mind. And I finally, at one point, once I retired, I said, if I'm ever going to do anything with this, I might as well put it on paper or put it down. And I am not a writer. I don't have an English degree. I've never taken a creative writing class. I didn't know the first thing about writing a book other than you sit down, you start typing. So
that's pretty much
all
it.
you need.
Yeah, that's it.
Well, I like to think so, but let me tell you what, that's not the case. It's been an unbelievable learning experience for me. But I've been lucky, and I've met some people that have helped me out a little bit, and so I'm feeling pretty good about what's going on and kind of the direction that I'm headed with this. And it's fun. It's a hell of a lot more fun than my dissertation was, let me tell you.
Well, yes, I can imagine dissertation, no matter what the topic is, does not sound fun.
No, it was a grueling process, but it was a process.
Right.
One of the things that you mentioned earlier is you were talking about sunken cities and hidden cities. I think a couple of things have happened in the last, say, 5 to 7 years that have really, really changed the world in terms of discovery and archaeology, which leads us to find hidden cities. And one of them is the creation of LIDAR, which is the new laser system that allows you to shoot a laser beam thousands of times over an area from the air, and then use an algorithm in a computer program that picks up the reflected laser and then the laser that actually touches the ground and remove the reflected laser. And so you can actually see what the contours of the land are. And
I rented an office once that was next door to a company that in Northern California flew drones, like military style drones over forest land in order to map the terrain for easier firefighting with this stuff.
Absolutely.
And you showed us this crazy, it looked like a Predator drone and everything. I don't know, it was crazy.
Well, they've got them. They got them for drones. You can take them. The run of the mill treasure hunter can buy one now. The prices come down so much, and what they do is amazing. And the one section that I know of, and I worked with the Guatemalan government at one point in time on trying to get some filming permits to go down there and document some of the Maya sites down there. But just recently, an aircraft flew over as part of the LiDAR mapping program down there, an area that they knew there were pyramids and the Maya civilization had been there. And they had estimated that there was probably 75 to 100,000 people that had lived there. They flew over and mapped it with LiDAR. And all of a sudden, this huge city complex came up with what are called sock bays, which are sacred roads, going out and linking to other sites in the jungle. And they've upped it to over 1 million people in that area. So, what we talked earlier, technology is really opening the door to finding the unknown, helping us learn more about prehistory or our history, and then making new decisions. Textbooks are having to be rewritten because of what we're finding out.
The risk of sounding flippant, I'm very interested on how 1 million people live in the jungle in one city without toilets.
Well, actually, I think they had a sewage system.
Really?
I think that's one of the things that I read. And most of the pre-Columbian cultures, whether they're in Peru, Inca, whether they're in the Central American area or they're in Mexico, most of them had running water in their cities.
Yeah.
I
read somewhere
some stuff on that.
Their cities were actually incredibly advanced, like in comparison to the
urban.
To the European people
see, that's
who were
what we're
coming
learning.
there. And we're like, whoa, what? How do they do all this?
Here's a Stone Age group of people that are much more advanced than we thought that they were.
Yeah, I saw one of them uncovering basically like a village built up a mountain, and the top of the mountain had been carved out to create a cistern that held water, and the water would run down, and basically it was a class system. The rich people lived up by the clean water, and it got poorer and poorer as the people lived down by the less clean water.
They call that trickle-down economics.
Yeah, apparently, but
is that surprising?
No, it's not, but it was really just amazing. I'm just how do you carve out a cistern that will save, hold, and re-water enough people throughout an entire year? That's crazy.
In the Yucatan Peninsula, it's basically much like Florida because it's mostly limestone. And they had carved cisterns, basically, where they would catch rainwater, or they would divert water from the aquifer, if they could get down to it, their cenotes, and have that run into the cities. I almost fell into one of the cisterns when I was down there tromping through one of the areas. And luckily, I had a walking stick, and I put it in front of me before I took a step, and the stick kept going, and I went, whoa. And when we uncovered the brush, here was a perfectly round opening, and when we've got lights down in there, smooth as silk sides, and then we started finding more of them at this site, and that's where they stored their water.
Wild. Yeah, it's just wild. All right, well, we're coming up on the end here. I'm pretty wrapped up into this. I want to ask you if you ever had malaria. There's a lot of stuff that I want to ask you, but we're at the end here. So, where's the best place for people to find out more about you? Of course, there's hepaldridge.com. And I saw that you can buy your book on Amazon. I know that authors sometimes have preferred places for people to buy their books. Do you prefer them buy it off of Amazon, or how do you want that to go?
It's fine. They can buy it off of Amazon, or they can buy it directly from me. Either way. The only thing is, if you buy it from me, guess what? I'll put my name in it for you.
All right.
Whoopie-doo. But it's one of these things. And once again, writing books it's so new to me, and I'm still learning as I go. and it's so much fun. You know, I'm getting fan mail. What's that all about?
Right.
Yeah.
I never dreamed. And people are saying, you know, would you please sign, you know, can I buy a book from you? Would you please sign it for me? Absolutely. I love it. I consider that a privilege. Thank you very much. You know, when you do that. But
what is that all about? I have a radio show. I don't get fan mail.
Try a little bit. You need to try a little bit harder, Chauncey. I'm not sure.
It's only because people hate us, Chauncey.
No.
I wouldn't worry about it.
I do get fan mail. I just didn't want Kara to know. All right. So you've been listening to Hep Aldridge here on Radio Wasteland. His website, hepaldridge.com. His book, Sunken Treasure, The Lost World, and Sunken Treasure Revelations. And a third to the trilogy coming up. We got a title for that one yet?
I'm working on it.
Working on a title for the third one? Order it from his website. If you want an autograph, order it from Amazon. If you just want to spend the money.
And they have the Kindle version.
Or the Kindle version, exactly.
Right.
All right. You've been listening to Hep Aldridge here on Radio Wasteland. Thank you, Hep.
My pleasure.